Right. So at this point, ladies and gentlemen, let me ask us to return to our discussants. To this time around for just about, probably just 10 minutes or so, very quickly, one person each will speak for about just probably 3-4 minutes on this. What are therefore, in your understanding, what the critical issues that experiential agencies must deal with post-COVID-19? Now, again, if you go to the document, the notes, we've kind of gone into 5 perspectives, 5 critical perspectives. So what are the issues we need to deal with respect to staff and well-being, our clients, the agency as a business, agency owners, which is basically based as shareholders and stakeholders, and then ultimately our responsibility to suppliers and vendors within our supply chain. I will ask Rosemary to kick this process off, and then we'll go to Mr. Olageshi and then Tunji Adeyinka. Rosemary.
Thank you, Rotimi. I think I will speak to each of one of those critical issues from the perspectives as you've outlined them. Staff and well-being being the first one. I think this needs to be a priority for the agencies. Probably not the priority number 1, but it shouldn't be lower than your priority number 2. I will come back to that point because from an agency perspective, your priority number 1 needs to be to survive, which is the agency business. How will you survive as an agency? I find it quite intriguing when I was reading through the data you shared, Rotimi, that the 95% of the people who participated in the survey agreed that the experiential marketing agencies will be impacted to a large extent, but only 50% said they had a resilience plan. So how are you planning to survive as an agency? I think the critical issue, and every agency must ask themselves is, how do I survive this? How do I survive this in the short term? And how do I survive this in the medium term? And I know this sounds simplistic, but having a plan needs to be your priority number 1. If you have a plan, you're not going to survive this. Okay, so as I was saying, your priority number 2, or the critical issue number 2 you need to look at is your staff welfare and well-being. God forbid that we start losing our staff to the COVID itself. That needs to also worry us. Making sure your staff are complying to the government and health body regulations. Are they working from home? If you're activating now, are they observing the necessary precautions that are required? That's really important. The other perspective I also wanted to look at our clients. We need to be considering who our clients are. I mentioned this earlier. On the face value, brands are going to spend less. There's going to be a huge impact on what brands are doing. That's actually true. But if you look closer, there may be clients who are not impacted to the same level as all other clients. We've been saying this, that there are clients, many clients are going more digital. That means internet providers, data providers are not as impacted as the rest of the business. So as an agency, you need to be asking yourself, who are truly my clients? Is that changing? What do I need to change in my client base? Then I also want to look at this from the perspective of the agency owners. Are we considering, or have we considered collaborations, consolidations with other agencies who either offer what we don't offer or are able to bring into the space where we are sort of solutions that we don't offer as individual agencies? If you also look at this from the perspective of the suppliers and vendors, how will we stand ourselves out? What are the terms and conditions that we are offering to them today, or that we offer to them post-COVID, that will make them either continue to be strategic vendors and suppliers to us, or make them go away? How do we enable them survive as part of our business. One comment that I would like everyone to remember, if you don't remember anything else I say, this is a real transition. There's not going to be this is a new normal. This is not adjustment. It's not going to go away. Life as we know it has changed. So we will either recognize that, and obviously there will be things that will go back to the way it was being done in the past. But life won't go back to 100% the way it used to be. We must recognize that as individuals, as agencies, as an industry, and therefore begin to propose solutions that will continue to keep us relevant in the minds of our clients and also consumers.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rosemary. I think there were very deep reflections that you offered there. Again, just very quickly, just to tease out some of those that I thought were quite pertinent. I think that, you said, again, rehashing on the point that Kenny Salami made, he said, look, we've got to go back to the fundamental, and the priority number one will be planning. And if you don't have a plan, if you don't have a resilience plan as an agency, you literally are putting yourself on the back foot, is the point that you made there. So I think that's an important point. I think you've also kind of reaffirmed the point that the client themselves are changing, and therefore we need to understand how they are changing and try and ensure that we are realigning our partnerships with them. Are you indeed serving the right clients, given the new reality, is the point that you made. You kind of also talked about this notion of inorganic realities, and by that I mean traditionally, well, not traditionally, in Nigeria particularly, the nature of the way in which the agency business or the agency marketing services business has occurred is that we had owner-manager entrepreneurs who built their businesses from scratch and won their relationships, and built their businesses through time. And that's great. But what you're saying is that in the new reality, maybe we need to start thinking about inorganic strategies. Agency partnerships and alliances, perhaps even the way to consolidation of agencies. This is a conversation point that has been reoccurring, quite honestly, over the last couple of years that we have been having joint conversations. And I think the fact that you underscore it again is important. And I think a conversation has to happen around that.
Okay, thank you very much, Rosemary. Glad to have you back. I think, first and foremost, we need to understand that what is happening now might be new to us, but it's not new to mankind. The Spanish flu happened 100 years ago, about 100 years ago. From the numbers that we hear, about 50 million people lost their lives to that. In Nigeria alone, we had about 500,000 people that passed on account of that particular pandemic. So we will definitely overcome this. One thing to point out, first and foremost, is that man is a social animal. Man cannot be kept locked up forever. We are created to seek interaction. If you see what is happening now across the world, most authorities are locking down populations and locking down cities. But after about a week or two, natural instinct of man to socialize, and people are looking for one way or the other to interact physically, even when they are basically sold of social distancing. It's important to make this point that so that we don't begin to think that, oh, that traditional how do we call it, proposition that we have, which as Tunde put it, that handshake, you understand, with the consumer, sooner or later you understand, we'll be back, within that space. But what do we need to do now? Immediately, well, now that we have the pandemic is still very much on the rampage, and then what do we do immediately thereafter? One thing for me that I take out of the idea that man is a social animal is the fact that we have a lot of pent-up demand as we speak. Nigeria runs a very informal economy. A lot of people depend on going out there to work to be able to earn a daily income from which they survive. So in no time, that entrepreneurial spirit, that spirit, that you have within the average Nigeria is going to push us back to work. So we need to see commercial activities happen again. Across the world, and this is not even peculiar to us, you're beginning to see countries, America, other locations, China, begin to talk about, look, you can't keep your economy under lockdown indefinitely. There is a cost to it. The economy is configured in such a way that there must be a continuous cycle of earning and spending. And it's those continuous cycles of earning and spending that actually is GDP. So, so even countries, authorities are also quite concerned about how quickly can we get the wheel of commerce rolling again. So let's make that point first. Then the other issues to how does this impact all of us. So I want to look at it from the point of view of our external and internal stakeholders. From the internal one, of course, the owners of the business looking to primarily how do they ensure that this business survives, and we do not have a situation where at the end of the day, you understand, the business actually crumbles, because it's a stark reality for some SMEs. For how much longer can they hold on without earning an income? So even if you don't want to let go of staff, if you're not earning an income, sooner or later, you understand, people will be owed salaries 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, you understand, and then you can't pay them. So there's a need, you understand, for the business owner, you understand, to be able to realize that if you really mean well, you understand, for your staff and everybody, then you must really have some plan in place that ensures the survival of the business entity. And that means you must critically look at where you are and what needs to be done to ensure that the business can survive. It's really, really very key. Businesses that have some sort of, how do I call it, a reserve in terms of cash flow and what have you, assets that is easily compatible to cash, might be able to find some buffer they can call on. But not all businesses are in this position. So you must look at where you are and be able to take very pragmatic steps in ensuring the survival of the business. Now, part of doing that also is to recognize that your staff are critical of your survival strategy. So the welfare of the staff and how to ensure that everybody, whatever is available, make sure it's able to go around so that the staff themselves can fulfill basic needs. So everybody, you understand, can be committed towards ensuring the survival of our daily bread. So it becomes something that everybody is committed to. But you must show commitment, to the staff and take their issues as that of the agency, and then together be able to look how best we get out of this, the challenges that we may face, and it will vary from one business to the other. On the side of the external stakeholders, I will speak first to the suppliers. If we look at the business that we do, apart from the creative and strategy side, a significant portion of our business, and for that we rely a lot on suppliers. We also must recognize that they are critical aspects, of our success, and so you also need to be looking at how do you ensure that your suppliers or your key strategic partners can also survive, so that whatever business opportunity that is available, you prioritize and scale your suppliers, the ones that are always there for you, who are always ready to support you. And you also must, have them in mind and ensure that you take their own business interests and survival into consideration too as well. And when everybody gets out of this, they will remember, you understand, in future. So, and the thing is that whatever is available, be able to say to them that, look, this is what is available. Nobody is talking about some profit now. All we're just saying is that, can we even ensure that the assets that we have, that we can all keep busy and earn enough to just remain in business? And then finally, on the client side, it was mentioned earlier that targets will not change. Commitments and the responsibilities for CEOs on the client side, marketing directors, commercial directors, they still have obligations. And so they'll be looking for solutions. And so this is a time for us to be able to look for ways that we can add value, put on our thinking caps, be more strategic and creative in our solutions to them, so that sometimes some of the solutions you may give now may not earn you much, but you're basically saying to them that, look, this is how best you should be able to ensure that you remain connected to your consumers and offer support that will help their business. When things begin to change, of course, you can also tap in on that. So I believe that it is not doomsday. I honestly think that, yes, we may end up losing a quarter, but the analysis and what one sees in our own side of the neck of the woods, if things don't dramatically change, in the next 1 week or 2 weeks, we might lose a quarter, but I still think bouncing back by the third quarter of 2020. Thank you.
So 3 things that Kay said, which I think we need to take on board. One is that I think there is this sounding of a voice of wisdom that, look, guys, let's remember that and understand that the staff are part of our survival strategy. I think that's a very important point. Speaking as somebody who has also had payroll responsibility, I know how difficult this period is going to be for anybody who has to make payroll at the end of the month. This is a very difficult time to be the person who has to pay salaries. But then I think that point, that philosophical stance is important, that we need to remember that, look, we're going to still have to think about this from the standpoint of staff being a crucial element of our survival strategy. I think the second point which you made is, again, with respect to the suppliers, sitting them down, and like you said, Kay, let's be clear, let's be equitable in the way we talk about what's available. I think the challenge also will be on the supplier side, the vendor side, given who we know how they operate culturally, to understand that we're all in this together at this point. So I don't know how that is going to happen, but there might be some suggestions when we come to the countermeasure point. Perhaps there needs to be maybe something from even an X-Man standpoint where all agencies can mail out to suppliers. Do you understand what I mean? To say, look, we are all in this together. We need to call for some degree of maturity. You understand what and some degree of calmness, so that we can deal with this all together. This is one of those areas, I think, where we can have a collective strategy that doesn't, that works for everyone. If a supplier is saying that 12 agencies are saying, look, we have all discussed this, we are concerned, but from a standpoint, we will do what we need to do. But please, let's have a bit of understanding. I think that will help at a time like this. Finally, Kay, you talk to the point of creativity, and that we must not forget that at the heart and soul of what we do is creative offerings. And so we are called to creativity more than ever at a time like this. So thanks a lot for that. Tunji, I think it's you next, right?
Yes, Rotimi. But I think people, the speakers have kind of summarized a lot of the key points. Leadership is very critical at a point like this. Indeed, it is at every point in time. But this even is more important because the entire organization will take a cue from leadership. So leadership needs at this point to be the evangelist. Need to continue to preach to the people because at the end of the day, there's a lot of people. A lot of people are depending on us as leaders and would also be looking at you to understand how you want this to go. And if you are not clearly identifying or showing signals of where your mind is, or you are the kind of introverted leader who zones off, this is not the best time to zone off, because every form of zoning off is going to be perceived by would feel the fear from the troops, and at the end of the day they can begin to take irrational decisions. So leadership will be very important in the short run. From a financial point of view, cash flows will be very, very important. Receivables, this is a time to chase receivables as much as possible, and to ensure that at least we get as much of what we have out there back in. It's very, very critical and important at this point. The short term is really from a business health point of view. How do we survive? Think about someone who is locked in for about a month, 2 months, and you say, what are the critical things that you need? I need water, I need some protein, I need some carbohydrate. Well, I may not be operating at full capacity, but this is the time to just ensure that I survive. So the perspective of business right now is to survive. Survive means that preserve your capital and stay in the field for as long as possible until things improve from an economic point of view. I like Kande's perspective in terms of being an incurable optimist, and I think it's a very important time for leaders to wear the hat of that optimist and to believe truly that the growth will come back, and to see how we can feel the growth in the mid to long term. Certain fundamentals that we also need to consider as both as a country, as brands, and also as agency owners. As a country, we've seen very clearly that if we don't invest in the health sector, in the education sector, and those key human capital areas, we're always going to struggle at the end of the day. If the first world economies are struggling with their healthcare, Spain and the rest of them, Italy, we need to take care in terms of the way we do that. Secondly, is also that we also need as citizens to be more involved in governance, because at the end of the day, as we've seen now, we're all part of this, whether we like it or not. From a brand owner's point of view, very good at also the McKinsey report that says a lot of brand owners don't want to let off people. It's also important in terms of the way that they deal with agencies from a supply chain point of view. These are not the days to insist on 180 days payment terms, or 120 days payment terms, because those are going to be very crippling at this point in time. So that is, from a brand owner's point of view, very important. Also, that consumers will always remember in the long run what you do now and what you say now. This is not a time to profit so much from people's problems. The third thing for us as agencies, and I think Rotimi and Rosemary mentioned that, is that if you look at the total size of our industry, we're tiny, we're small, and there is no way, if you're talking about cash reserves, if you're talking about being able to, if you're talking about cash reserves, you're talking about cash reserves come out of sustainable profitability. Cash reserves profitability, where you are able to not share all the profits as dividends, and you are taking part of that into a reserve, which you would need for a day like this. It is difficult for 80 to 90% of the companies in our sector to have strong cash reserves, because practically live from hand to mouth. And that then brings the business sustainability point to the table, that do we really want to continue to operate as standalone small businesses who cannot run 100 meters or cannot run over 5,000 meters? So we need to begin to think about that, and we need to begin to think seriously about consolidation. But if we're talking consolidation, not just to pay lip service to that, but we need to start to think about mergers. We need to start thinking seriously about changing the business model if we're really looking at sustainability at the end of the day. So we're looking at asset sharing and sharing assets, and say I have this, I want to share with others. A perfect example that you see in the marketing space is WPP is putting out Kantar for sales. Kantar is their intelligence, their research unit. Why? Because at the end of the day, the kind of services that Kantar would offer would need to be like third-party services. So should we start looking at taking out some of our business units as third-party business units, where we're looking at diverse investors that service the entire industry and not just service us? So we need to begin to think about that seriously. From a creativity and innovation point of view, we need to start to think about the kind of activations that we put together, the kind of experience, technology and digital, very key, artificial reality, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and the rest of them are big deal in terms of what we need to think about. Secondly, and in conclusion, is that what we put together as activations have a second life, and a lot of us have never really used that second life, because if we put something together very well, it is what you're using as second life. That is what the ATP is showing as old matches today. That is what the EPL is showing as old matches today. It's old content, which is old activations, which we can put together and then use as a second life from a content point of view. So those are my concluding points, really, from a sustainability point of view, and looking at this from a short-term, mid-term, and long-term perspective.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tunji. Again, a lot of food for thought. You kind of have hit a lot of the nails, which are, if you don't mind me saying, have been recurring themes over the last couple of years. I think more than anything, what's happening here is that this disruption into the operating landscape is again calling attention to some of the fundamental questions that have still not been answered. Whether we are culturally ready as individual players to accept some of these new realities might be what the issue is, but nonetheless, the truth remains the truth. And so, just to quickly rehash, you've said that we are called to leadership as a critical moment like this. Cash flow is going to be king, so we need to put in place plans to make sure receivables are managed. You've said the overriding issue in terms of a critical issue for any business now is survival, certainly into the long term, to stay in the game for as long as you can. But then you've asked this important question, which again, Rosemary asked. Guys, at a time like this, does it make sense for us to be standalone? And and this is a question that each one will answer on their own. It's I know from my own experience, that it's not an easy question to ask, nor is it an easy question to answer, but it's a question that's not going to go away. That's clearly, and I think that my little experience in certain other environments is that I think the organization, the industry is a bit more developed to understand that we can have inorganic strategies. There's nothing wrong in putting down, in merging organizations. And so far you have a structure that makes sure that everybody is still happy. So we'll come to that. I have two people in the participant group that I would like to make comments, if you don't mind. The first is Julius. Julius, if you're there, I'd just like you to, again, on this section, we've kind of wrapped up this section before we now go to countermeasures. If you have a comment or two, it will be most appreciated. And immediately after Julius is Wale Olagunjo. Is he there? If Wale is there, I think Wale too should please just stand ready to just give us a few comments. But let's start off with Julius. Julius, please, can you unmute and just speak to us about, if you have just to give us a sense of where you are in this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for all the presentations. Yeah, these are indeed challenging times, and I want to pick up from what some of us have said. Yes, we really need to be optimistic that things will change around. Like Kaide said, 100 years ago, this kind of experiences took place. However, the dynamics have also completely changed. We find out that even churches today are looking beyond the COVID-19. So the question is, will services continue to hold as normal? Would their interaction with their congregants continue to happen as normal? The answer is probably no. It will be a combination of two, and of course, deploying the virtual angle of it or using technology. So I think we really need to think deeply. How can we move forward after the COVID-19? Things are certainly going to change. Yes, is that people will return back to their old ways. There are set for many of us. I think a number of us work for multinational brands. They are going to set some grand rules for their brands in different countries. In other words, even if the local company wants to still engage as normal, the way they are, because the local companies can do that. But some of these multinational companies are going to insist on certain forms of engagement. So we must be very mindful of that really things are not going to fully return back as they were before COVID-19. I think the other point I need to pick on is that key to our survival really, and key to going forward still is how much cash reserve you have. How much money do you have in the bank account? If you don't have any, then survival becomes a big problem. But having said that, I think that, like has we talked about it and a couple of other people, are key to our survival journey. So if we must COVID-19, the staff we have today are still going to remain very relevant. So we must think strongly on how we are going to manage the staff we have right now, given the challenges. No income coming in. Some of us do not have the cash reserve, as it were. So these are just some of my thoughts I thought I should share. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julius. But thank you for your contribution. I think basically what I hear you say is a reaffirmation of a lot of the things that the other discussants have said. But you have again erred on the side of optimism, which I think is good, which is an important thing. I think it's important that we are able to let our staff particularly, and even our stakeholders, know that we understand that the environment is difficult, but we are still optimistic about being able to make sure we survive. But of course, to do this, there are a lot of countermeasures that we'll need to put in place. So Tade, can we have a few words from you? Your thoughts so far?
Okay, I think on what everybody has said, ExperientialNG is quite something. Let me use the word for all those things. But I also want to toe the line of some of the things the various speakers have said, as in there will be challenges, we all agree. Post-COVID-19 will be there anyway. However, from what we have heard from social media and from medical doctors, they say it has come to stay with us. It will be like flu also. Whether they develop vaccine, I don't want to go into all the other theories and all those. That's not the area we're here. But I want to believe that in anything that it will not be a situation of the West fit into Africa or let me say Nigeria movement. So basically, our socio-cultural milieu will also play a role in this whole thing. Nigeria being what we are, I cannot see it that let's give it a time. This quarter is over. Before the end of the year, the whole thing should go down. Owambe will start. When Owambe starts, everybody believe that we live with COVID-19 and continue to do it. But the other aspect I'd like to speak with is in terms of our staff. We already are aware that even in our industry, it's rather difficult to attract young people. And this is part of the I was working on while planning the Experiential Summit for us to be able to attract young talent. for us to attract young talents, it now depends on how we treat the existing staff right now. I know it will be tight, but we have to also talk about transparency, about communication, about let people be aware. Let all of us see this is what is coming. This is what we need to do. This is what is available, so that there won't be news out there that communication marketing are the one now retrenching. We know it will be tough, but at the same time, we all agree that we need to reinvent ourselves. We need to be more creative. We need to put in caps. And the time to do it is not post-COVID-19. The time to do it is now. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Tade. Thank you very much. I will please crave your indulgence that I share my screen very quickly so that I can explain certain things to others. Before I cede the floor to, so I'm just very quickly going to try and share my screen to explain a point. But this is where we are. I've noticed that we have about 40 people, 44 people or so, I'm not sure, but who are here at the moment. And we'd like you to, if nothing else, at least get involved in this conversation. Now, we have to discuss the possible countermeasures. These are very specific actions or actionable steps that we can take across a range of issues. Again, we kind of choose to look at those issues from 5 critical perspectives. Short term, long, medium term. Kayode will speak to us broadly about the economic issues, while Tunji Adeyinka will speak on the experiential marketing industry specifically, and Rosemary, who has already started us off quite honestly, will speak to the issues that individual agencies might want to consider, both in the short term and medium term, across these 5 perspectives. What I would like us to do, please, is for everyone who is currently in the chat room or in this meeting room, if you do not mind, I would like you to take one element, but I would like everybody, all the 44 of us, to please be involved, because the whole idea behind this is also crowdsourced thinking. So what I would like you to do, please, is to take one of these aspects, either particularly the short term, the medium term, pick any of the various perspectives that matters to you, or that you have an idea or you have a thought about: staff well-being, clients, agency as a business, agency owners, supply and vendors. What are the things that we can do in the short term? What are the things we can do in the medium term? I would like you to please, where you are, just quickly write this down in your own document somewhere, and you will email it, if you do not mind. You will email it back to us. Now, the email address I'll give you right now at the end when I finish sharing this, but we want everybody to contribute and crowdsource ideas, not just to be passive listeners. So you will email it, and you can email it immediately. And as you give it to us, we will try and make sense of it. We will try and consolidate them around specific themes and put it together as part of the playbooks, which will be the outcome of this session. Because as I said earlier in the mail, part of what we want to do out of this is to make sure that we have a document which we'll refer to as a playbook that all participants, all stakeholders in experiential marketing can look at, refer to. Okay? Right, so having said that, can I then now ask Kayode to please just take us through for the next while. We're running out of time, but to take us through a few minutes, I will ask for just 3 to 4 minutes in terms of countermeasures, thoughts around countermeasures at the economy level. And then we will, after that, follow closely by, I think it's Tunji, and then Rosemary. So Kayode.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I touched on this earlier. I will just, basically, most of these resides at the government level as catalysts. And as I mentioned, the government is so far taking some measured but appropriate response towards this. I already mentioned that the cut of 1.5 trillion from the 2020 budget And part of what went was the provision that was made for fuel subsidy. They've also looked at, so that is out of, that was one of the good measures they took. We also looked at the fact that they were considering borrowing as much as $29 billion before. That has been jettisoned. Now they are looking at borrowing about $6.9 billion from World Bank, IMF, and African Development Bank. I think that's very, very key, because really the government is going to be challenged on the revenue side in being able to implement the budget. And this is a time when we really do need to spend to be able to kickstart the economy right after COVID-19. So they've taken some measures regarding that. I mentioned also earlier the 500 billion palliative, towards the bottom of the pyramid, the social investment program and the different initiatives they have in there. I think that's very, very critical in ensuring that the most vulnerable within the society have some support at this critical time. Don't forget that these are also consumers, and for certain products, they are the ones who they spend, and that spending is also part of what accounts for whatever business that some of the major clients who provide products also count as part of their revenue at the end of the year. So there are some measured, responses in that area. We've also heard about, federal and state government levels, I won't call it a tax holiday of sorts, but delayed filing, some considerations in terms of whether even looking at existing loans and extending moratorium, from the bank, banks. This is a CBN initiative. So there are a number of things along those lines. What I haven't seen,
can I quickly interject and ask you, if you do not mind, are there, from the points you are raising, are there any ways you can extract those that are pertinent to us that, for instance, might require like advocacy? So, for instance, are there specific steps and actions that we can take either as a trade body, being in X-Man under the leadership of Tade, or broader to be, Advan or whatever, or I beg your pardon, APCON or whatever, to be able to actually go forward and make very clear statements? Because this is the time, quite honestly, that trade bodies should also be asking government for certain types of support, will be my expectation.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I was leading on to that in terms of the moratorium that the CBN is saying that banks should give. If you look at one of the challenges that we face in our own sector, is a major challenge with cash flow. We have a perennial cash flow problem, and this stems from the payment terms that we have to endure with our clients. So if you're looking at an average of 60 days or 90 days payment term in terms of when you get your money back, this is really crippling, you understand, for SMEs that most of our businesses are. So I think that given what is happening with COVID-19, even if it is for a short period, perhaps we can have some engagement, you understand, with the client as a body, basically saying that, look, can this be relaxed so that whatever the current payment terms that exist with any of the clients that we do business with, can they consider reducing it by half? So that if it was 90 days, can we go back to 45 days? If it was 60 days, can we go back to 30 days? And make that as an engagement point, as their own support, you understand, for the industry as a COVID-19 specific palliative. And perhaps this can run, you understand, for the next 6 months or to the end of 2020, whatever period that they find convenient for them. But I believe that if the pressure on agency cash flow is improved, then that is one clear sustainability area, you understand, for the agency. So, to just round up, manage time, I believe that we also need to very much monitor what is happening in the environment, in there. There are different initiatives, coming up. And so we need to be on the lookout, whether there are going to be opportunities for us to be able to access some form of intervention that is available. So is anything being done by the central bank that they've actually given instructions to the banks to do? If we don't know, we won't even be able to tap into it. Is there anything, product that we have with the Bank of Industry? I believe that it is something that we must specifically look out for, and then see how we can tap into such opportunities. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we ourselves, we are consumers. And so we produce services, but we also consume services and products. And I believe that to the extent that we are enabled, and we also enable our staff, we are actually in a position to also ensure that we make our own contributions towards getting the economy back on track. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, great. So can we now have, was it Rosemary? I think you next, and then Tunji. Thanks, Kay.
Thank you, sir.
Rosemary?
Hold on a second.
Okay.
I'm trying to. Okay, so the flow you had originally was for, I think it was for 20, but if you would like me to go now.
Yeah, please go. Yeah. Oh, sorry, the flow next would be industry. So I take the point. I appreciate that. Thanks. Tunji, yeah, so that flow is important. So Tunji, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Rotimi.
All right, yeah, you should go next, and then Rosemary. We are mindful of time, guys. So
yeah, this will be very short. Kayode has mentioned something. I think Xman needs to very closely just find out from the government point of view, is there any kind of palliative which is being given out, especially to ensure that staff are paid. If there's any kind of palliative, and you have different approaches to that. Maybe the US is giving $2 trillion and then paying people, just virtually cash. So
I mean, the UK government is doing 350 billion pounds. I mean, this is
exactly.
And it was all released within a week. I mean, that the government has been absolutely amazing in the way they have.
So we need to find out what is happening and engage. I know that there's a lot of confusion when we start talking about is it APCON, is it this association, how do we go that? And this is where those kind of relevant issues become very, very critical. So I think we need to find out. The second part is that as an industry, as we've always done, we need to pay a lot of premium on professionalism, because at these times I expect that clients who are very, very, very easy with their budgets and could spend it with their friends and family will be more exacting now to ensure that every naira travels far. And to do that, they'll be looking for professionals who can prove a return on investment, who can prove that what they're spending is they're doing it in the right way. So we need to pay a lot of premium as an industry. I'm very happy that we're doing this. I'm not sure the other subsectors have started doing this, but it is very critical that we continue to champion professionalism and thought leadership, because that is going to help us as an industry. Innovation, very critical at this time. We need to unlearn a lot of things as an industry. We need to begin to talk in different terms than we used to, especially when we are talking about data and also looking at how to engage technology. The next one, as we've said over and over again, is sharing resources and looking at ways to optimize the assets that we have. And finally, is to also begin to look as an industry to look at governance issues, in the different companies, and not be briefcase companies who remain briefcase companies from one generation to the other. I think the association and from an industry point of view, we need to seek to transform that. And this is not just for a sub sector, but for the entire sector. It's one man in a lot of cases, and governance is really very low. So those will be my contribution from marketing.
Thank you so much, Tunji. Well said. Rosemary, let's go over to you. I'm scared that this thing will shut down. So let's just have you. If it does, we might just try and see if we quickly reassemble just to wrap up. But then, yeah.
All right. So we've heard about the outlook of the economy, and I don't think much of it was new to us. But also, we've heard about the impact on the category we're playing. But how do we react as individual agencies? I think that's critical, because that's what's needed for each one of us. I think that I've said this before. There are three things I want to say. The first one is, as an agency, we must all have a plan.
Can we be louder? Is there a way we can be louder? Or am I just sorry, Rosemary?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, just slightly louder if you can. I don't know what the reason why it is, but yeah, go on.
Okay, so I said the first thing is that we need to have a plan.
Yeah.
Is that clearer?
Yes, but carry on.
Okay, there are three scenarios that I recommend. Each agency must sit down and create three scenarios. The first one is what I call your best case scenario.
Yep.
That best case scenario assumes that this pandemic will be contained in Q2, June, and then activities will be unleashed and the economy will pick up immediately. That's the optimistic scenario.
Yep.
The second, the most likely or realistic scenario. It assumes a recession.
Yep.
It assumes it will be over by early to mid Q3, and then our activities will restart in 2020.
Yep.
Your worst case scenario is your scenario number 3, which is the pessimistic scenario.
Yep.
It has deep recession, but it also assumes that this will be contained in Q4, and then recovery will only be in 2021. There are things each agency must ask themselves. For each of these scenarios, what do I do as an agency? The second question is, what is within my control? Because there are things that are within our control as individual agencies, but also as X-Man. There are things that are outside our control. We can't vaccine, I'm assuming we can't find a vaccine for COVID.
Unfortunately not, unless Kenny can, because Kenny can do all things.
But there are things within our control, and I think that wisdom calls that we focus on those things that are within our control. So my second point, and my third point is, as leaders, we must be brokers of hope.
So brokers of hope.
Hope, yes.
Well said.
This is not the time to look only on the gloomy side of things. The only way you can lift people out of gloom is by looking for the positive information. Every time I look at the news and I see the number of people who have been infected and the number of people who have died, they fail to mention the number of people who have recovered. You must, as a leader, find the hopeful news and share it with your team so they keep going. So remember, have a plan. Think about what other ways you can service your clients that you're not currently doing today. What are the trainings that you need to be going for that will help you get better as an agency, but also your people? Consider collaborations. Let's be innovative. Let's think outside the box. Let's be bold. As they say, he that is down needs fear no fall. This is the time for us to break the borders for what experiential marketing agencies have been known for. Let's come up with innovative ideas and change how these clients see us, but also change our landscape as an experiential marketing agencies. That's my personal submission.
Thank you very much, everyone. Now, can I just say this? I don't know how this is. I'm not sure whether this will shut down, but let's just carry on. If it does, it does. So let me just do a bit of a quick summary. Our next steps. First and foremost is to say thank you to everybody who's been here present. We haven't finished, but I just want to do the courtesies. So if it cuts off, at least the courtesies have been done. The second thing clearly is to each and every one of the participants, the discussants who have made their comments, because quite honestly, you've given us your brain power for free. But as Kay said yesterday, it is also in enlightened self-interest that we do this. And that goes without saying. However, there are a couple of things that I want to quickly add to the conversation in terms of what we do need to do next. The first is that we really do need to make sure we capture what we have said. This is being recorded, that's all well and good. But to the lead discussants, please, you have that frame and the form and the conceptual framework. If in your spare time you can fill it out, it will be extremely useful, because we will take that back, flesh it out, and make it available to all. To those who are participants, I've noticed that 1 or 2 people took the challenge. Others did the Nigerian thing of just stepping back quietly and watching. Please, leadership happens at times of disruption. So again, please, whatever your own thoughts are, please email it. I've given you the email address there. We will consolidate all of this into, as I keep saying, a playbook. We'll tidy it up. We will add a couple of things to it, which hopefully will make it extremely useful to all of us to be able to execute. All right, so I just wanted to throw in my own 2 cents in terms of some thoughts that I wanted to share with colleagues. The definition of experiential agency does not end at live. The business definition of what experiential agencies do does not end at simply live activations. In fact, the question I always ask when people say, oh, I'm a digital agency, I say to them, who isn't? Every agency that is in the services, that is into marketing services today needs to be digital because that is where the world is. And so more than any time, quite honestly, I would imagine that more than at any time, we need to really deeply ask ourselves as agencies, why are we limiting ourselves to the first level of experience, which is typically the organic or the activated experience? The amplified experience is fundamentally where we need to raise our game to. So I'm not saying that. So in other words, the honest question, the conversation is that we are in the business of experience, not necessarily in the business of live activation. Live activation is just a touch point. So I think a lot of agencies going forward need to go back and ask themselves, how then do I, one, either build competency in being able to ultimately offer amplified experience? Honora is basically, you are showing us the real estate. So you need to do that. I think we need to ask ourselves fundamentally, where is my value add and where is my competency currently in being able to offer clients things which are more amplified? Because amplification is going to be what the challenge is. And we all know that the best way to amplify anyway is to throw in digital forms of media. That is one. But there are other things that I think we need to start asking questions about. For instance, what are we doing in terms of content creation? Because what happens when disruptions like this occur is that you find new audiences and new channels. In the UK, for instance, what is being found is young people who you could never reach using traditional channels are now forced to sit in front of the television, right? But the type of content that television that's been pumped through television is changing rapidly, very quickly. From places like even the Anglican Church now creating all sorts of new types of, services for children's school. I mean, children's church on Sunday into interactive, so you can go onto it from TV, and from there they are able to take you onto online. So I think that we're called to that type of innovation. I think the other point that I wanted to make, which hopefully others should not forget, is this. The consumer is going to be watching everything. This is really more for the brand owners, but in many ways, I think we are the ones who speak to the brand owners. It's been proven that if you go there, it's been proven that if a brand stops advertising or communicating, it loses up to 13% on sales, and it loses up to 1% market share. This is a global statistic. I think those are the kinds of things that we need to bring that evidence to the table on behalf of the clients that we work for. It would be a mistake to go dark, but more importantly, is for them to understand that we've got the competence of being able to move some of the conversation away from the traditional live out of home chat touch points into more in-home touch points that still drive a degree of experience. Let me tell you part of what is occurring globally. A lot of youth marketing now is moving on account of this challenge that is happening. A lot of brands are now moving into esports. Are we together? Can you hear me? So, esports, e-music, e-gaming is basically locking down young people in home because they're captive. All those platforms are experiential platforms. They're not, and you can still drive that as an experiential agency. I think another thing that we need to look at is the fact that we need to, part of the conversation that both Rosemary and I think Tunji made, and also cross-aligned with some of the things that Kenny said, this is also the time for us to start thinking about collaborative platforms that we can drive as what I'll refer to as new business opportunities, not new client opportunities. What do I mean? Setting up an e-gaming platform for Nigeria, are you with me, should be something 3, 4, 5 agencies sign up to as joint shareholders of. Does this make sense? These types of platforms are the kinds of platforms we need to go into now, would be my recommendation. In other words, we need to, there was a point Tunji made that was absolutely profound. He talked about Second Life. One of my biggest frustrations personally, having served brands for almost 30 years, is this. You work so hard for the brand to activate a campaign over, let's say, at most maybe 9 months or even 3 months traditionally. At the end of that, the intellectual property for all that work goes to the brand. You're left with nothing. In fact, I say that musicians are probably even better resourced than agencies, because a musician releases a song and for the rest of the life of their lives, it is their intellectual property. They will continue to earn residual income. I think that we need to start thinking like that. Yes, Rosemary? Okay. Okay, so I think those are the things I have. Oh yes, the last thing I wanted to say is this. It's been proven, research was done. Today, every consumer in the world over, particularly those out of Asia who went through this crisis, and in Europe who are currently going through this crisis, say they need the brands to communicate with them more than ever before. And they need the brands to communicate in ways that do the following. One, tells them, just like Rosemary says, that things will be okay. How can we do that experientially? Two, that brings entertainment into their lives because they're all sitting at home. And even after COVID, they will have to sit at home more often than before. Three, that helps them to solve the problem of how can I make some money? Because survival is now a crucial issue for families. So in other words, how am I able to help you to be able to solve this problem of being able to survive? And there are no binary systems to this. Four, there are 5 or 6 themes that has been proven to work in days of disruption, consumer disruption. 1, appealing to solidarity and strength. 2, appealing to our sense of safety as humans. 3, bringing the outside inside the home. 4, helping them to manifest online lifestyles that they did not have before, such as TikTok. And I don't know whether I've been listening to, what's that song? Don't Rush. Is it Don't Rush? You know, there are all sorts of new approaches that have become very exciting at a time like this. 3, very important, positive habits and wellness. And finally, financial resilience. So these are just some elements in terms of research that's been done globally, but we will put all this together, and as best we can, we shall try to share with everyone. I think that in closing, I think that what we have done today, permit me, and I speak to my colleagues here with a lot of gratitude. I think what we have done today is immense in terms of having to be able to come together. This in itself is showing resilience. But it is clear to me, like Rosemary said, that a lot of agencies should have been here. A lot of agencies say they have resilience plans, but they really don't. Do we really understand what it means to have a resilience plan and how it's put together? I think Rosemary kicked us off in starting some of the ideas of what it can be. Part of what I will be doing as a fallout of this is sending out more material in how to actually build a resilience planning system for business, basically, but because this is part of what we teach here. So I think this will be helpful to my colleagues. If it's not, you can always throw it in the bin. But more importantly, I want to thank every one of you for what you've done. You've spent your time with your colleagues, and you've been very generous in sharing your thoughts, your concerns, and I think very mature in showing your fear, because I tell people part of being able to improve things is to be honest enough to say what you are not good at. I think that this is a great thing we have done, and I'm hoping that by the grace of God, once we put this together, we'll have something we can all use to help us, not just at the micro player level, but the industry level. I want to thank all the discussants, Rosemary. I want to thank Tunji. Certainly, I want to thank my president, Kay. I want to thank my current president, Tade, for agreeing and encouraging that this carries on. If he had shut it down, it wouldn't have happened. For all those who also who made their contributions, thank you so much for your time. But it's not over yet. Please try as much as you possible to just put your thoughts down, email it. I'll do the work with one or two others that I work with to try and consolidate it into a document that we can all find useful. But finally, to each and every one of you, please keep safe. And may the Lord Almighty protect all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
God bless all of you. Cheers.
Thank you, boss.
Best.